At my wedding, my in-laws showed up drunk, and it seemed like they didn't care about the whispers and looks from other guests. Things escalated when they began yelling at me, saying, "It's too late now that you're married, but if you want to be part of this family, you need to prove you have enough money." Then they added, "Yes, your dad is right. Make sure to give us $500 every month as a bonus." I was completely shocked by their outrageous demands. I couldn't believe they would say something so inappropriate at my own wedding reception. My face went pale, and I just stood there, stunned. Before I could respond, my father stepped in. He took the microphone from them and said, "Enough is enough. Don't you realize you're embarrassing yourselves?" I felt a wave of relief as my dad defended me in that moment. "My name is Jessica, and I'm a 28-year-old office worker. I've been dating Liam, who is 31, for a while now. We met through a mutual friend who was concerned about me being single and thought Liam might be a good match for me. After a year of dating, Liam proposed, and we decided to get married. My life hasn't been the easiest. I lost my mother when I was very young, and my father raised me on his own, working tirelessly to provide for me. Growing up without my mom was incredibly painful, and because of that loss, I became very protective of my emotions. I hadn't been in any serious relationships since high school because I was afraid of getting hurt. In fact, I had come to terms with the idea of staying single forever. Then Liam came into my life. At first, I didn't have any romantic feelings for him, even though he asked me out multiple times. But Liam was persistent in the most caring way. He treated me with so much respect and kindness, and slowly, I started opening up to him. Over time, I realized how much he meant to me. His constant support made me feel incredibly happy, and I found myself thinking more and more about spending my life with him. When Liam finally proposed, I knew I was ready to take that step. He understood me completely and was always gentle no matter what. "Don't worry," he would often say. "If you ever feel unsure about anything, I'll always be here for you. I love you, Jessica. You can count on me." His words touched my heart deeply, and I knew he was someone who would always be there for me. As the wedding day approached, I felt both excited and a little nervous. But I knew that with Liam by my side, everything would be okay. When I told my father that we were getting married, he was overwhelmed with happiness. "Jessica, you're finally getting married. I'm so proud of you," he said with tears in his eyes. "Oh, Dad, you're being dramatic," I teased, but deep down, I was moved by his emotions. Through all the challenges, I've found someone who makes me feel safe and loved, and I'm ready to start this new chapter of my life with Liam by my side. I jokingly said to my dad, "Wow, I hadn't heard you say anything like that before." He laughed and replied, "Well, I was always a bit worried that you might never get married." Surprised, I said, "Oh, really? I had no idea you felt that way." My dad smiled and responded, "Every father worries about his daughter, you know. But anyway, congratulations." "Thanks, Dad," I said, feeling a wave of happiness. It meant so much to be congratulated by the man who had raised me all by himself. I could already tell I was going to cry at the wedding, and knowing my dad, he'd probably cry even more than me, especially since he was already tearing up. After that, Liam and I dove into wedding preparations. Since we were both busy with our jobs, our days were jam-packed. We worked throughout the week, and on weekends, we spent every free moment planning the wedding. There was hardly any time to rest, and our schedules were completely packed. On one rare day off, we planned to visit Liam's parents' house. I had never met them before, so it was going to be my first introduction to them. Liam had already met my dad right after he proposed, and I had intended to meet his parents soon after that, but with their busy schedules and ours, we couldn't find the time. Finally, we arranged a visit after some weeks had passed. As we drove to his parents' house, I suddenly started feeling nervous. "Don't worry, my parents are very kind," Liam reassured me with a smile. His words calmed me a little, and I took a deep breath as we arrived. When we rang the doorbell, it was his mother who opened the door. "Mom, I'm home," Liam said cheerfully. "Welcome home, Liam. It's so good to see you," she replied warmly, smiling at her son. As they talked, I stepped forward and introduced myself as politely as I could. Nice to meet you. I'm Jessica, Liam's fiancée. Immediately, her tone changed. Her voice was much cooler when she responded, "Oh, so you're Jessica," and the smile she had for Liam disappeared. She looked me up and down, as if evaluating me, and then led us into the living room. Her cold attitude didn't improve once we sat down. "So, Jessica, I'm curious. What do you bring to the table? Liam is our only child, and he means everything to us. If you're going to marry him, you'll need to prove you're worthy of him. Are you really a suitable wife for our Liam?" she asked, her voice full of judgment. Her words felt less like a conversation and more like an interrogation. I was stunned and didn't know how to respond at first. I hadn't expected such a cold reception from my future mother-in-law. She continued, "You do understand that marrying Liam means joining our family, don't you? Are you truly ready for that?" Of course, I knew that marrying Liam meant becoming part of his family, but it wasn't as though they were some famous high society family or royalty. I was confused about why she was making this sound like such a huge commitment. I wondered, why was I being treated like I needed to meet some grand expectation? It felt as if nothing I said would be enough to please her. I wasn't even planning on living with them, so the pressure from these questions felt unnecessary and overwhelming. As I tried to figure out how to respond, Liam's mother seemed impatient with my hesitation. She snapped at me, her voice sharp. "When I ask you a question, answer right away. You're being so rude." I was stunned by her harsh tone. "I'm asking if you're ready for this," she continued, raising her voice even more. Despite feeling overwhelmed, I managed to respond, "I believe that Liam and I will support each other in our marriage." But that answer didn't seem to satisfy her. With a dismissive look, she replied, "What a naive thing to say. You're not just going to support each other. Your job as a wife is to support Liam. It's your duty to stand behind your husband. You don't even understand the basics." Before I could react, Liam's father, who had been sitting quietly next to her, finally spoke up. "Honey, calm down," he said, trying to ease the tension. Then he turned to me, offering a weak apology. "Sorry about that, Jessica. I'm sure my wife's words startled you." I tried to remain calm and replied, "It's all right." I wanted to believe that his mother was just overprotective of her only son and had spoken without thinking. Maybe she was nervous about meeting me, but that didn't make her words any easier to bear. Just then, Liam's brother entered the room. He seemed gentle, with a quiet and calm tone, which gave me a brief moment of relief. But that relief didn't last long. With a smile on his face, he said something completely unexpected. "Actually, what my wife says is justified. What concerns me the most is that you come from a single-parent family." Confused, I asked, "What do you mean by that?" He calmly explained, "Being raised by a single parent doesn't have the best public image. It's hard for us to feel comfortable having someone from that background marry our only son." I couldn't stay silent. "Hold on a minute," I said, unable to hide my frustration. "What's wrong with being raised by a single parent? My father worked incredibly hard to raise me by himself, and I'm proud of him. My upbringing doesn't make me any less capable or worthy." But they continued to argue. "Since you were missing one parent, you couldn't have learned how to be a good wife. Things like doing housework properly. I wasn't going to let that slide either. Actually, I help my father with a lot of housework, and I'm a pretty good cook too. So please don't make assumptions about me." Despite my efforts to defend myself, Liam's mother ignored everything I said. She then finally stated her demand. "I will allow you to marry Liam, but in return, you must promise to devote yourself completely to us because we are Liam's parents. Can you promise me that?" I was taken aback by her words. It wasn't just about marrying Liam, it felt like they wanted me to surrender my entire life to them, as if my only role was to serve their family. I was completely shocked. "What? Since you came here to ask for our permission to marry our son, you do know what your duties are, don't you?" Liam's father continued speaking before I could say anything more. It felt like my in-laws had taken over the entire conversation, giving me no chance to respond or explain myself. Later that night, as I reflected on everything, I realized I needed to talk to Liam about how I felt. "Hey, Liam, do your parents always talk to people like that?" He seemed completely unfazed and replied, "What about it?" I was surprised he didn't seem to see anything wrong with the way his parents had spoken to me. Well, I mean, the way they spoke to me and the things they said, I tried to explain, hoping he would understand. "Oh, really? They were just making sure you're ready for marriage," Liam said, still not showing any concern. "I get that your parents are worried about their son's marriage, but I feel like what they said was a bit too much," I continued, trying to get my point across. Liam shrugged and replied, "Why? They didn't say anything wrong. Besides, they've given us permission to get married, so don't worry about it." Although that was true, it bothered me that Liam didn't seem to see things from my perspective. It felt like he was siding more with his parents than with me, and that was troubling. Sensing my unease, Liam gave me a hug. "Jessica, you don't need to worry so much. My parents are just a bit upset because their only son is getting married," he said, but his words didn't feel fully supportive. "It's all going to be fine. Don't overthink it. I'm sure they just want what's best for us. They want us to be a great couple like they are. That's why they were a bit harsh." "Really?" I replied, still unsure. Maybe Liam was right, maybe his parents had high expectations for us. But even if that was the case, I didn't think it was right for them to belittle me just because I was raised by a single parent. In my mind, people who speak that way don't necessarily make a great couple themselves. After thinking it over, I realized that we, as the ones getting married, should be the focus, not whether his parents approved or disapproved. With that perspective, I decided not to dwell too much on what his parents had said, even though it still bothered me a little. Finally, the day of the wedding arrived. We were surrounded by many guests, including our relatives, friends, colleagues, and bosses. I walked down the aisle with my father, who had raised me on his own. It was a special moment that brought tears to my eyes. When Liam and I exchanged vows and rings, we were met with applause, and for the first time, it truly sank in that I was now married to him. It was a feeling of happiness like I had never experienced before. As we made our way into the reception hall, we were greeted by our guests, and there were even videos of us as part of the entertainment. The atmosphere was joyful, and I chatted with my friends, soaking in the love and excitement of the day. Despite the ups and downs leading up to this moment, I knew I was ready to start this new chapter with Liam by my side. I hadn't seen many of the guests in a long time, and it was heartwarming to receive so many congratulations. Despite my earlier worries about Liam's parents, I was genuinely glad I had chosen to marry him. I was also happy that we had decided to make this day a special one, creating memories we'd cherish forever. After the ceremony, we planned to officially register our marriage, making everything official. Liam and I would truly be husband and wife. Every moment felt precious, and I couldn't help but feel overwhelmingly happy as time seemed to fly by. Soon, it was time for the final part of the event. The bride, groom, and both sets of parents lined up to greet the guests. However, I began to feel uneasy again because of Liam's parents. We were supposed to stand in line together, but his parents were visibly unsteady on their feet. Their faces were flushed bright red, and it became obvious they had drunk too much. Some of our relatives even asked if they were okay. Although my in-laws were clearly intoxicated, we needed to finish the ceremony and wrap things up. As the moderator handed the microphone to Liam and me, things took an unexpected turn. Out of nowhere, Liam's mother grabbed my hand roughly and yanked it away from Liam's. She shouted at me like she was delivering a wrestling challenge. "Listen to me, Jessica. After this wedding, you're going to devote yourself to us completely. Prepare yourself, because we're going to test you, and it won't be easy." The guests started whispering, and some thought she was joking, laughing awkwardly. But I knew she was serious. Then, Liam's father took the microphone. "Jessica, aren't you embarrassed to wear a dress like that? It doesn't suit you at all," he said rudely. His wife chimed in. "Yes, dear, you should have told her the truth." The tone of the guests' whispers quickly shifted from amusement to discomfort. I looked to Liam, hoping he would step in and defend me from his parents' hurtful comments. But instead, he stood there, not doing anything. When I asked him quietly to intervene, he just shrugged and said, "They aren't doing anything wrong." That's when it hit me: Liam wasn't going to protect me from his parents. He didn't see their behavior as a problem, and that realization shook me. In that moment, surrounded by the buzz of whispers and murmurs from our guests, I knew I would be left to fend for myself when it came to his family. My in-laws, still drunk, continued to hurl insults at me. "You're already married, but if you want to be part of this family, you need to prove you have enough money," they shouted. "Yes, that's right," they added. "Once you register the marriage, you should give us a few thousand every month and don't forget to hand over your entire bonus." I was completely shocked. I had never imagined they would say such things at our wedding reception. My heart sank as I just stared at them, feeling my face grow pale. I couldn't believe what was happening. Seeing the situation spiraling out of control, my father stepped forward and took the microphone from them. "Enough of this. Don't you realize you're making fools of yourselves?" he said, though he still managed to keep his tone respectful. Liam's parents glared at my father, their expressions hostile. "Why are you interrupting us while we're talking?" they snapped. The tension in the room was palpable. It was supposed to be a day of celebration, but it had turned into something far from the joyful occasion I had hoped for. I stood there, feeling the weight of everything hit me at once, unsure of what the future held now that I had seen this side of Liam and his family. They said, "I knew this woman's father was no good. Single parents are never any good." Hearing them insult my father like that made my blood boil.
How dare they say such things about him?
But my father, keeping his cool, calmly replied, "You people are even worse than I thought. You refuse to meet me simply because I'm a single father. I never expected people like you to work for someone as respectable as President Jeremy." At the mention of President Jeremy, my father-in-law's face suddenly became serious. "How do you know President Jeremy?" he stammered. "My company does business with him," my father explained, "and more importantly, he's an old friend of mine." Then my dad added, "And speaking of single parents, President Jeremy was raised by his mother alone. So, in your ignorance, you've just insulted the president of the very company you work for." At that moment, I saw my in-laws' faces pale as the realization of what they had done finally sank in. My father-in-law, his arrogance gone, quickly fell to his knees and pleaded, "I apologize, sir. Please, don't tell President Jeremy about this. I'm begging you." Just moments earlier, he had acted like he was in complete control, but now he was completely defeated. The guests, who had been silently watching, started laughing. Some even pulled out their phones to record the scene unfolding before them. But my father wasn't going to let him off the hook that easily. "No matter how much you apologize, you can't take back the words you've said," my dad replied firmly. He then walked over to me and gently asked, "Jessica, do you want to go home with me?" Without hesitation, I said yes. I took the microphone from Liam's hand and addressed the entire room. "Thank you for the entertainment," I said, looking directly at Liam and his parents, "but there will be no marriage." The room went silent as I continued, "I will make sure to return all the money that was given to us for this occasion." With that, I walked out of the reception hall with my dad by my side. As I left, I caught a glimpse of Liam and his parents, their faces frozen in disbelief. His relatives rushed over to them with worried looks, and I could only imagine the chaos that followed. True to my word, I later returned all the money we had received from the guests, apologizing for the abrupt end to the celebration. To my surprise, everyone was supportive. They expressed their sympathy and praised both me and my father for standing up to such awful people. Many said it was good that we hadn't allowed ourselves to be taken advantage of. In the days that followed, word spread quickly about what had happened at the wedding. Liam's coworkers who had attended the reception shared the story at his workplace, and soon, Liam became infamous for having such unreasonable parents. Worse still, people criticized him for being weak and failing to stand up for me. The embarrassment was too much for him, and he eventually resigned from his job voluntarily. But the fallout didn't end there. The story reached President Jeremy himself, the head of Liam's father's company. When he found out about the incident, Liam's father was demoted and transferred to an insignificant division in the countryside. The arrogance he had displayed at the wedding was completely shattered, and he was left to face the consequences of his own actions. Meanwhile, I felt a sense of peace, knowing that I had made the right decision for myself. I walked away from a toxic situation with my head held high, proud of my father and grateful for the strength I had found to stand up for myself. I heard that Liam's family has been ostracized by all of their relatives because of what happened at the wedding. While it's unfortunate, it really was the result of their own actions, and sometimes situations like that are simply unavoidable. In the meantime, I've been using this experience to grow closer to my dad. We've been spending more quality time together, and it's made me appreciate even more all the sacrifices he's made for me. One day, he sat me down for a serious conversation. "Jessica, are you interested in running the business?" he asked, his voice filled with both hope and seriousness. I hesitated, not quite sure where this was heading. "Do you mean? Why don't you work towards becoming the president of my company?" he suggested. It was a big step, and I could see that he truly believed I was ready for it. Though the idea felt overwhelming at first, I knew I wanted to take on the challenge. "I'll do my best," I promised, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. In that moment, I decided to focus on my career and personal growth instead of diving into another romantic relationship. I wanted to prove to myself and to my dad that I could excel and one day be a strong leader like him. Since that conversation, I've been deeply involved in learning everything I can about my dad's company. The work is challenging but also incredibly fulfilling. I'm determined to make the most of this opportunity and step up to the responsibilities that come with it. Reflecting on the chaos at the wedding, it's clear that Liam's family was completely unreasonable. What should have been a beautiful celebration turned into an embarrassing spectacle, all because of their behavior. Fortunately, the marriage hadn't been legally registered yet, which spared me from making a binding mistake. Now, free from any ties to Liam or his family, I can focus on my future without any drama or in-law issues hanging over me. Looking back, it's a relief to know that, out of such a chaotic situation, a clear path forward emerged for me. I'm excited about what the future holds and the potential of eventually leading the company. I'm grateful for the strength I found through it all and optimistic about the journey ahead. Thank you for staying with me through this story. I hope anyone watching can take away something valuable from my experience. If you enjoyed this, please consider subscribing, and I look forward to sharing more with you in the future.